name's Hunter Pierce, and today I'm going to be talking about my final research report, or the events that happened on my birthday, June 13th, 2001. So it all started at 7 a.m. I was born at Carthage Area Hospital in 2001 on June 13th. I was born at 8 pounds and 4 ounces, and I was born with my twin sister, Lori, and we were taken home to where I still live today. And the movies that were popular around that time were Shrek, a legendary movie, and Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Rings, which is also a very popular movie. And also, one of my personal favorites, American Pie 2, which I think should be everyone's favorite movie. So to start off, there was world news, which was a ceasefire in Iran and Palestine that was brought up by the United States. So essentially they were in a state of almost war. It was 8 months of nonstop violence, just unrelenting just violence. And the CIA and the FBI had to get involved, and essentially it took 6 days of intensive mediation between the two leaders and the at the time director of the CIA, George Tenet, and the leader of the Liberation Organization of Palestine, Yasser Arafat, and Ariel Sharon, the leader of Iran. Well, Yasser Arafat was on board, but Ariel Sharon was not thrilled with the idea of it. So essentially they came to terms, and they had to start being team players for each other. Essentially they had to start getting wanted terrorists out of each other's countries for each other, and just stop harboring terrorists or criminals of any sort, really. The next was national news. Essentially a terrorist who attacked the embassy was sentenced to life. He didn't attack the embassy on June 13th, but his trial was on June 13th. He was sentenced to life. He had 213 counts of murder and not a single chance of parole. Next is state news. What was going on in 2001 was a shortage of teachers in New York City, and this is obviously a problem due to a very dense population even at the time. So what New York had to do to get some of these graduates to go to New York City was to obviously offer something that would be enticing to teachers that were going to New York City. So they had all these programs and set up so that teachers would feel the need to actually go to New York City. Next was entertainment news. Essentially, New York City was selling theaters, which theaters are still around. They're not as relevant as they used to, but back then, Lowe's Theaters was what was around. They had a ton of theaters all over the United States, and they went bankrupt. They were selling all their theaters. They actually canceled or shut down 108 theaters, and also canceled plans to make 5 more. A lot of people were upset about this. They said theaters were part of the community and how it was such a shame. Next was sports news. George Steinbrenner, the old owner of the Yankees, was getting very upset with their record. They were losing, and George Steinbrenner even said that he would go as far as to, well, this is actually a quote, he said he would spend money to replace the front line of the Yankees after one loss, which a lot of people said he was too harsh. I suppose if you're a business person, you gotta do what's best for your business, and if you're losing, but he was still being much too harsh. And on the other side of it, Bobby Valentine, he actually played for the Mets and was the manager of the Mets too, they were losing, and instead of getting upset at the team, he was upset with himself. There was articles saying that he'd spend nights staying up and not being able to understand what he did wrong, and how he just couldn't. Essentially it was his fault, and he was blaming himself, and the team thought he was being too hard on himself. So the who was in charge of both teams were